Welcome and thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Peas in a Podcast. In today's episode, we are discussing the M word, the menstrual cycle. Men, if you want to know, and it, how should we say that? Uh,
Say, men, do you ever wish you had a guide or a user manual for your woman? You do. It's her menstrual cycle.
Men, do you ever wish you had a guide or a user manual for your woman? You do. It's her menstrual cycle. And that's what we'll be discussing in today's episode. I'm Damien Rader, founder of The Real Man Can. I'm a certified life purpose coach and I specialize in helping men discover their purpose, build confidence, and achieve success. I'm here with my soulmate, Abby Vajejo. Abby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, my love. I'm a holistic licensed healthcare practitioner, registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and health coach. And my area of expertise is women's health, fitness, and hormones. I teach women of all ages how to align their diet, their lifestyle, and their exercise with their hormones in order to unlock their most vibrant health.
So in today's episode, we're talking about the menstrual cycle. What is the menstrual cycle? I'm a man, and if I'm like most men, which I imagine I am, we don't know more than our woman bleeds for 5 to 7 days, once a month. That's pretty much the extent of our knowledge. So my first question would be, how long is the menstrual cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question, love. And I just want to start off by saying most women don't know either. I mean, we know we have a period every month, but the education around this is so incredibly lacking. I mean, basically, before I became a licensed practitioner and specialized in women's hormones, just remembering like what I learned growing up and the things that you hear about, it was pretty much like, oh, you're going to bleed once a month. And then eventually one day it's going to stop and you're going to go through menopause. Like that's kind of the extent that most women get to. And I think men get even less. So don't feel bad about that. And I love that you asked that question. So we tend to think that a cycle, like we say, oh, I'm on my cycle, I'm on my cycle. But that's not just the bleed week. The actual cycle for a woman is a monthly cycle.
Wow.
And you can think of it kind of like the moon, right? We as women, we are so similar to the moon. We tend to follow a lunar cycle, which is every 28 days. So
Mhm.
that's the average cycle for a woman is 28 days long. And there's actually four different components to her monthly cycle, one of them being her period.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that, like the moon, a woman's cycle goes through different phases
Exactly.
as we transition through this 28 to 32 day period,
Mm-hmm.
which we call a month.
Exactly.
A lot of men and women don't know that it lasts that long. We think, okay, well, for me personally as a man, all I knew about the menstrual cycle was that women get moody, they bleed for about a
We
week.
do.
They bleed for about a week, and that's pretty much it. I guess the mentality that I had, and I feel like a lot of men have this mentality, is I don't get a menstrual cycle. I don't go through that. I don't understand that. And so therefore I don't really have the right to speak. I should just give her space and know that, sometimes it can be uncomfortable for her when she's bleeding. And that's pretty much been the extent of it. And I think that the reason why a lot of people don't know about the menstrual cycle is because it's such a taboo thing in our
Mm-hmm.
culture.
It
It's
is.
like almost like saying a bad word, the
Yeah.
M word.
Yeah.
So like we come up with these cute names for it, like Aunt Flo's coming,
Yeah.
or she's on the rag.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't say like it's like something like feces or defecation.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's such a filthy thing. You don't want to talk about it openly. You don't
Yeah.
go out in public and talk about your poops to a random stranger. And even with that, we use nicknames.
For sure.
Yeah, unless you're a dietitian. And
Most people don't.
yeah, and it's like, so we come up with cute names for that too. We say poop, we say doo doo, dookie, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because that is something that is looked at as being vulgar, disgusting,
Hmm.
which is actually accurate because defecation is waste. There is no purpose that it serves other than
Hmm.
maybe being fertile to the land,
Hmm.
but it's nasty, it's disgusting, it's full of bacteria that is not good for our health. It's literally the waste product of our body.
Yep.
And I think that we kind of equate the menstrual cycle with that because when a woman bleeds, we know it's waste. We know
Hmm.
that she's expelling something from her body.
Hmm.
But I think that it's important that we make a distinction between these two things because this is where that barrier is coming into place, where we don't feel comfortable talking about it. The
Hmm.
difference between a menstrual cycle and defecation is that a menstrual cycle is a part of the reproductive process. We need that. Like as a species, as human beings, the women's menstrual cycle is so vital to our existence. Without
Literally.
it, we wouldn't be reproducing on this planet. It's actually a blessing. It's a miracle that a woman can even bear a child.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important that we normalize that cycle. And this is why I wanted to bring this to men. I feel like Prometheus bringing fire from Mount Olympus to to men. Like, guys, we're about to get it. She's an expert in this. She actually specializes in teaching women how to sync their cycle with their business, with their daily lives. And she's about to, with their diet,
Exercise.
exercise, and
Mhm.
we're about to get in on all.
Thank you, love. Yeah, so I just really wanted to preface this by going back to the lunar cycle for a minute because I think that that's something that we as a species have lost. It's something that cultures in the past used to be really in touch with. You know, if you think about it, living by the seasons, living by light and dark, living by the moon, and farmers tend to be more in touch with this, right? Have you ever looked at a farmer's almanac and it tells you like when during in the month you should plant new seeds?
Wow, yeah.
When, you know, when they're ready for harvest kind of thing. And so we as humans throughout history, we have been linked to the lunar cycles and women. So back in the day, you know, and I hypothesized back in the day before we had all this blue light and we were under artificial lights all day long, you know, when we lived more in accordance with nature, all the women kind of tended to sync up with the moon. And the tendency is that, you know, if you live in that way, the tendency is that in the new moon is when you bleed and then you ovulate during the full moon. Now, every once in a while, there'll be a reverse cycle where she's bleeding during the full moon and then ovulating during the new moon. And the reason being is because the innate wisdom of our bodies, that was there would always be some women to take care of each other, taking care of those that were during their bleed week. So you'll find it going either way when you look at that. But it's just so important, I think, that we get back to our true nature as human beings. You know, how far have we come from that? And so I think it's just so the moon is just a beautiful example because we as women really we live by the moon, we kind of bleed by the moon, so understanding that is really helpful to understanding a woman's cycle.
And I've always heard that the woman's menstrual cycle was tied to the moon
Hmm.
cycle.
Hmm.
And like when we look at the earth, for example, the earth is 75% water. So is the woman. The woman's body is composed of about the same amount of water that
Hmm.
the earth is. And we know that the moon affects the tides of the ocean.
Yep.
And so it only makes sense that if a woman has this much water in her body, that the moon could affect her cycle as well.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I think we've lost touch with that fact because of modern society
Yeah.
and the taboo that's around talking openly about the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that we're we're talking about this. This episode is not just beneficial for men, but women as well. Let's talk about the different phases. Let's get into the different phases. When is day one of a woman's cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned that there's actually four different phases that a woman goes through every month. Day one would be the first day she bleeds. So the first day
Okay.
of her period. So the first phase is going to be days 1 through 10. And that's what I call estrogen phase.
Estrogen. Okay, so estrogen. When I hear estrogen, I think of the female hormone. When it comes to men, we have testosterone, which is what gives us our energy, our drive, and when we're able to do all these amazing feats,
Mhm.
and obviously superior in strength and
Build muscle.
stamina, build
Hmm.
muscle. It's because of our high levels of testosterone. So women tend to have a higher level of estrogen than men do.
Hmm.
And you're saying that in this first phase is when they begin to build that estrogen?
Yeah, so the four phases are really defined by having a different hormone coming out to play. So, like
Oh,
you guys, so yeah, let me just break it down here so you really understand how this works. You guys have testosterone every day, all month long, right? You kind of get it every 15 minutes.
wow.
Whereas we as women, when I mentioned those four phases that we go through, each phase we have a different hormone that's coming out to play. And for us, that's why your woman can be kind of a different person between one phase and the next because she's got a different hormone and each hormone has a different personality.
Oh, wow.
So I think we should really get into like what's the personality of each hormone because it's really going to help you understand what's the personality of your woman that's going to be coming out during that phase. So like estrogen, for example, that's phase one, right? That's the first day she bleeds. Now, a typical bleed is going to be anywhere between like 4 to 7 days, right? And I said estrogen phase technically goes from day one to day 10, right? So during the phase of estrogen, now, caveat here, the very first day or two that she bleeds, she might be very inwardly focused. She might be bleeding a little heavy. So it might take her a few days to like grow into this estrogen phase as it builds. But once she's about like day three, that estrogen that's going to start coming out, like you said, estrogen is one of the main female hormones. So what do you think about, the stereotypical like divine feminine? She's nurturing, she's outgoing, she fosters connection, she's great at communication. So this is a time when that like mothering, nurturing, gregarious, verbal, extroverted side of us comes out. So this is a time when she's probably really easy to be around. You guys are having good communication. She's open, she's friendly. It's a great time to, if you guys have had any conflicts, it's a great time to address those during that phase because she's going to be the most open to it during that time.
All right, you hear that, guys? You hear that? So I familiarized myself a bit with the cycles only because I'm around this woman who's an expert in these things. What I hear you saying is during the estrogen phase, this is the time for conflict resolution.
If need be.
If need be, this is the time to discuss those topics that might be a little more sensitive because since the woman's estrogen levels are higher,
Hmm.
she's more capable of communicating effectively
Hmm.
and she has that nurturing
Yep.
nature. And I think of a man who is at his peak. Um, it's usually when he has higher levels of testosterone. He's at his best.
Hmm.
So it only makes sense that a woman would be at her best when her estrogen levels are higher.
Hmm.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense to me. I get it.
Yep.
But no one's ever taught me this.
Right?
So it's so simple, but until we are educated about it, we just don't understand.
Yeah.
What is the next phase after these 1 to 10 days of estrogen building take place?
Yeah, so estrogen actually continues to build, but I give this next phase a different name. I call it ovulation phase because this is when a woman is going to ovulate. So she bleeds, that's day one, right? And then about 2 weeks after her bleed is when she ovulates. Now, this is a little different for every woman. So I say anywhere between day 11 and day 15 if we started the count on the first day of her period. So she's done bleeding. And so now, somewhere between day 11 and 15, she's going to ovulate. Now, what does that mean? Estrogen is still coming to a peak. So she still has all those wonderful qualities of estrogen going on.
Okay.
But now we also have testosterone coming in. And
Okay.
this is really the only time of the month when a woman kind of gets a bump in testosterone. So, what does that mean? Well, her libido is going to be higher. And for all you men listening, it's probably the main topic of interest right here. So let's just highlight this for a moment. There is going to be times, and maybe as men, maybe you have noticed, maybe you haven't. There are times of the month when she's going to be a lot more in the mood, a lot more receptive, and a lot more ready to go in terms of sex than other times of the month. So the time is during ovulation, so days 11 to 15.
Wow. So this is probably why men are such horn dogs, is because we have higher testosterone.
Hmm.
And women have higher testosterone during this phase of ovulation.
Hmm.
And so then they have a higher sexual desire as well.
Yep.
So this is the time that we should try,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
try to better down
Hmm.
is during ovulation.
Yep.
So one thing about ovulation, when I think about ovulation, I know that that's the time a woman can get pregnant. And so I think that's something to be mindful of. And it seems like it's a really short window. What did you say, about 5 days?
It is a good thing to be mindful of course. I mean, this is a time when a woman is most going to want to have sex, but because there's a biological reason, right? Because that's when she's the most fertile, she's the most primed to get pregnant during that time. But
Okay.
yes, it's a very brief window. I mean, we only ovulate over the course of a day or so, but that window kind of when we're getting more testosterone extends out, I would say, to about 5 days when you can be feeling those effects of the testosterone.
Okay. So if a couple is trying to get pregnant,
That would be when.
that would be the ideal
Yeah, you'd want
time.
to try and conceive during that
So
time.
if you were trying to calculate that, then you would start from day one being the day she bleeds,
Count out to day 11.
count out to day 11, and
Hmm.
day 11 to about 16,
15.
15 is her most fertile period
Mhm.
when she is most likely to get pregnant.
Yep.
Okay. So what else do we need to know about ovulation?
Other things about ovulation, this is kind of the time when we as women feel like superwoman. This is kind of like the best time of the month. So we feel more like a goddess. We have all this estrogen. So we just feel outgoing, but then we have testosterone coming in. So we feel more sexy. It's the time of the month when we are most like, it's the best time to like take us out and wine and dine us. We're going to have the most personality. Like, we're just going to be on point. We're going to be the most creative, passionate. It's kind of like the best version of us comes out to play during this phase.
Nice. And I noticed like during that phase, when you're in ovulation phase and we go to the gym, that's when
Mhm.
you get in some killer workouts.
Oh yeah.
So I
Yeah.
imagine like that is that's carried not just to the gym or to a workout, but if you want to go out dancing or,
More energy, stamina.
yeah, I see that. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
So that is ovulation phase. So take us into the next phase because this wonderful period of time when her libido is high, her energy is just
Everything's
popping,
perfect.
yeah, is not, it doesn't last
It
all
doesn't
month.
last.
So what happens after that phase? What's the next phase following estrogen?
And we wish it lasted longer.
Oh, don't we?
We sure do. The good thing is it comes every month, at least that.
There's that.
So the next phase, I call it the dip phase because really from days about 16 to 19, all of our hormones kind of take a little dip. And you might notice this a little bit in her personality because suddenly, she just went from being the goddess and she's energetic and she's strong and she's in the mood and she's just on point. And then all of a sudden her personality kind of crashes a little bit
Okay.
and she's a little bit less social. Maybe she has a little bit less energy, right?
Okay.
Starting to get a little more irritable, maybe. And so it's that other side of her personality coming out.
Okay, so what I hear you is don't take things personally at this
Mm-hmm.
time because it can be, as men, especially if we don't understand that this cycle is happening throughout the entire month. She was just in a fantastic mood these past few days, and I come home and suddenly she's just not as energetic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh crap, did I do
What did I
something?
do?
Yeah.
What did I do? Yeah, and I think that's why it's so key for men to understand is that you probably didn't do anything. She's going to be more primed at certain times of the month. She's going to be more primed to actually identify problems. So that's bringing us to the next phase, actually. So the dip phase is kind of a short window. It's kind of a transition phase.
How long does it last?
Days 16 to 19. So you get about like 3, 4 days in there.
Okay.
And then, so the final and fourth phase is going to be progesterone, which is days 20 to 28. So this is basically like the week before her period. Now, this is the week, guys, that she needs the most love in terms of like patience and understanding, because this is the week when, as women, we're actually hardwired to identify problems. And what that often looks like, unfortunately, is us kind of nitpicking and pointing out every little thing that you're doing wrong. Now, if we channel it appropriately, it's actually a good time for us to identify like patterns and things in our life that need an upgrade and that we can change, like a pattern of communication that's no longer serving us or an old behavior or something like that. So it ultimately has, there's some positive there ultimately, but unfortunately, when we're not aware of that, what can end up happening is we just get really nitpicky, we get irritable, we have cravings, like we start to crave carbs and we're hungrier during that week. We get less social too. Like I was talking about the difference in personalities. So estrogen and progesterone kind of have the opposite personalities, where estrogen is extroverted and nurturing and outgoing.
Hmm.
Progesterone is more introverted. She's less social. She kind of just wants to like hang out on the couch by herself and eat some carbs and maybe watch Netflix. She doesn't have the same capacity that estrogen does.
Okay, it's okay. So what I hear you saying is that this is the time when she's gone through this entire month of having her cycle and she's reached the point where now she's kind of physically exhausted
Hmm.
and her body is asking her to relax, to
Yeah.
take it a bit easier.
And also, I just kind of want to interject. So, if you think about like the purpose that this cycle serves, so let's take it back to biology and reproduction, because that's ultimately what it's all about, right? So, if you think about it, this sets us up as women, the cycle sets us up to procreate effectively. So, going out in the beginning of the month, we'd want estrogen coming in so we can start to connect, so I can connect with you,
Huh.
right? Then during ovulation, I get some testosterone, so
Mingle.
I'm in the mood so that we can, we
Oh,
can have
wow.
sex and we can
Yeah.
procreate.
Yeah.
And then once I have that fertilized egg, it's going to be in my nature to withdraw a little bit. I'm withdrawing from the party because I
Hmm.
have what I came for, right? I'm
Yeah.
withdrawing from the party. And now my focus is kind of turning inward,
Oh,
because
wow.
if I was actually pregnant, then I would start, that whole internal journey that a woman goes through, with her body and maybe like nesting in her house and all that kind of thing. So it is very much optimized for us to go through that process every single month. So even when the goal is not pregnancy and we're not pregnant, we still kind of have that phase where we kind of turn inward and we can reassess how we're going to do it better the next month. And then we go and we do it all again the following month.
Wow. I'm so glad that you said that. It just goes to show how amazing nature is, this creation, us as human beings. We are designed so beautifully, and everything within us and about us serves a purpose. It's not just, because society will have us demonize certain aspects of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It'll be like, oh, these pesky hormones or that, and I'm glad you said that too, because a lot of times women will say, oh, I'm just PMSing. Well, that's premenstrual syndrome. Like that's an actual syndrome. You're not just, as a woman, you're not just automatically PMSing just because you're in progesterone week the week before your period. And it is not normal for that week to be awful. Now, yes, we might be a little prone to irritability. Obviously, we're going to be hungrier. We're growing the lining of an organ, the endometrium, right? So there are, subtle things that might happen, but for women who are experiencing major hormonal issues, and lots of mood swings, just know that that's not normal and that does denote an underlying hormonal imbalance going on, because these things that we're talking about, they're subtle, right? And we joke about it like, yeah, her personality completely changed. It changes a little bit, but she's still the same person. If she completely seems like another person, I'd really advise getting hormones just to see what's going on.
And that's when they would consult with an expert like you.
Hmm.
I think that it's so important for us as men to understand these phases. I was at a game night with my family once, and there were women there, and it just so happened that they were talking about chocolate cake, and I interjected, and I'm like, "Why are you guys all talking about chocolate cake?" And the look I got, the reaction I got, I'm like, "Oh, my bad," and it's because as a man, I didn't truly understand. Now that we've explored these phases, I understand they were probably in progesterone,
Yep.
craving carbs.
Yep.
Why is it that women crave carbs during progesterone?
That's a great question. So, progesterone actually needs blood sugar to be a little bit higher for us to come to a healthy peak in progesterone and have a healthy cycle. So, a woman will naturally crave carbs. And like I said, she's also growing part of an organ, right? She's growing the lining of her endometrium. So, she's going to need a little bit more calories during this week. And a lot of those tend to be cravings for carbs because blood sugar needs to be a little bit higher for progesterone to be healthy. So that's why women always crave carbs the week before their period.
Wow. Okay, so there's science behind it.
There is.
A cycle goes through these different phases, and certain parts can be quite uncomfortable for a woman. What recommendations or suggestions do you have for women that can potentially, like, say, ease cramps or just make going through that process, those rough patches, a little easier?
Yeah, I have multiple. I have a lot to say about
Oh, okay.
that. Well, I'll try to keep it brief, but basically, first of all, have empathy for yourself and know where you're at in your cycle. Like I track mine. I use an app called Clue. I have the free version. It basically just allows you to track where you are in your month so that you can figure it out. And I do figure it out every month and then I write it down and then I always text Damien and tell him like, okay, in this week from this day to this day I'm going to be in estrogen, from this day and this day I'm going to be in ovulation.
It's like a cheat code.
It's like a cheat code, so he knows, and it took you a few cycles to understand like what each phase means.
Mhm.
But now that you get it, and I can just say, "Oh, love, I'm in progesterone right now," and like he knows what I mean.
Yeah.
So first of all, ladies, get to know yourself, get to know your cycle, have empathy for yourself. Or men, if you're listening, encourage your woman to do that. If she's not tracking her cycle, encourage her to start tracking. It's so easy. There's like I said, there's apps like Clue that you can use, just writing it down, making it a little calendar, honestly, so you know where she's at and she knows where she's at is so much easier. And then if a woman takes really good care of herself in that progesterone week, the week prior to her period, the period is easier. So here's the other thing is I was saying that progesterone that day 20 to 28, she's more introverted, she's less social, she has less energy, she has less capacity for stress. So that is not the time to argue or schedule anything that might be stressful or, a lot of intense energy or things like that. As much as possible, you want to keep that week as calm and as relaxed and low key as possible. So it's best for women to like have easier workouts or, take a deload or like a recovery week that week, do things that are more restorative and don't schedule like big stressful events during that time as much as possible. So if you're taking good care of yourself and giving yourself grace during that week, your period's going to be a lot easier. Now, that said, if menstrual cramps are a problem, then, there's certain things that can help. So again, I would definitely recommend getting your hormones tested because it's not normal to have awful cramps and there's probably an underlying hormonal imbalance, but things you can, start doing to help with that. Huge ones for me have been magnesium. So taking a supplement like magnesium glycinate, about 400 to 600 milligrams a day is usually a good like recommended daily amount. That can, I mean, for me, that helped me so much with not only avoiding menstrual cramps, but also like muscle recovery after workouts. Magnesium is so key. Another one that's really helped me and can be really helpful for kind of painful, awful periods is ginger.
Ginger,
Ginger root.
regular ginger.
Yeah, ginger. Yeah, ginger root. So, I mean, I get it as a like a chewable tablet. You can also do ginger tea as well, or like ginger chews. But ginger is so helpful. So I like to take ginger all month long just for the circulation and anti-inflammatory benefits. But you could always just start taking ginger like the week before your period. And if you just do it that week before your period comes in, you need at least 3 months to start really seeing the effects. But I've heard from women time and time again that immensely helps alleviate menstrual cramps.
Wow. Okay, so that's really insightful. Men, we don't have periods. Obviously, we don't have cycles. Our cycle is that of the testosterone. Every 15 minutes,
Hmm.
we get
Every
a
day,
boost of
in
testosterone.
15 minutes.
Every day, every 15 minutes. But honestly, if I'm being frank, talking man to man, some of us act like we have cycles. And I mean, honestly, it might be because of low testosterone levels. So in order to optimize testosterone levels, I would highly recommend men, the way that magnesium works for women, we should be taking zinc. Zinc helps us build testosterone. So if you are having trouble with mood stabilization, having sexual dysfunction, I would highly encourage you to take zinc. I also would encourage men to take rhodiola, which is an excellent herb, which enhances sexual performance and just overall wellness for men's health.
Now, as a licensed healthcare practitioner, I always have to give the little medical disclaimer. Of course, before starting anything new, you want to check in with a knowledgeable practitioner that can help you and make sure that these are right for you. But these are things that we personally have used and have good experience with and have had clients and know many people that have taken them. And there's really solid research on that as well. So just wanted to make that little disclaimer there.
Absolutely. Men, it's important to communicate with your woman so that you are aware of where she's at in her cycle. Don't hesitate to ask her, hey, what day of your cycle are you on? Or when does your period start? Or ask her to let you know day one of her bleed so that you can be able to track where she's at in her cycle.
And even if she brushes you off, because if this is something she's not used to doing, that might feel really uncomfortable for her because as women, we're programmed not to tell men about this. So, like, this would be a good opportunity for you to say, I want to learn about this. Like, this matters to me. I actually heard that you're different at different times of the month. You actually go through 4 different phases every month where your needs are going to be a little different. And I want to help support you through each of those phases. So, let's start tracking these. And I think if you show genuine interest and make it like a safe thing, a safe space, then that would be really helpful. So if it's not something she's already doing, just really encourage her to do that. And if she is and she's interested in this, you're going to get major kudos for being interested. Like, I think it's the most amazing thing that you've learned my cycle and the fact that you know each of the phases and I can just tell you what phase I'm in. Not only am I super impressed, every woman I know that I've told about you is super impressed. I mean, you get major kudos for this. And it just makes life that much easier because, like you said, it's an instruction manual for your woman. Like, men always say, "Oh, I don't know how women work. They're so complicated." We're really actually not. We're really actually not. The knowing her menstrual cycle is the key to knowing your woman.
I will say that I do feel like our relationship has improved so much. Not that it wasn't great. It's been great since day one.
But this takes it further.
It just helps us to better communicate and for me to understand
Mhm,
what you're going through as a woman
mhm.
according to your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
One more thing. If a woman does have questions or is seeking professional help, you specialize in that. How can a woman get in contact with you if they need help with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So they can find me at balancehormonesvip.com. That's my website. And I have some free resources on there as well. So if you go to the main page, I actually have a free resource that has those 4 phases listed out. And ladies, if you're interested, or guys, if you think your woman might be interested, I actually have it laid out how she can change her diet and her fitness according to what phase she's in. And all the phases are written there. The lunar cycle's on there. I've gotten really good feedback on this free resource. So just go to balancedhormonesvip.com, click on resources, and you'll find that there.
And thank you so much for sharing your brilliant mind and insights with us. Let's summarize some of those key points, the phases that the woman goes through, just so that we can reiterate that one more time.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. So, first day she bleeds is day 1. Day 1 through 10, that's estrogen. She's going to be more social. She's going to be more nurturing. She's going to be more outgoing. If you need to resolve conflict, that's the time. The next phase is ovulation, day 11 to 15. This is when testosterone starts coming in. So, she's going to have a higher libido. Guys, this is the time she's going to be more likely to want to have sex. Okay. She's also going to have more energy and she's probably going to be like Superwoman during this time. Then days 16 through 19 is dip phase where everything kind of dips. Her energy levels might start to crash a little bit. Her personality might start to crash a little bit. And that's kind of a transition into the last phase, which is progesterone, days 20 to 28. This is the week before her period. Now, this is the time when she's going to be less social. She's going to be more introverted. She's going to have less energy. So low stress, more patience. She's going to be craving carbs, and she's also going to be primed to like notice problems more during this time. So this is a time to really be supportive and just kind of love on her extra until you get back to estrogen and start it all over again.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Peas in a Podcast. Thank you, Abby, for your great insights. And until next time, peace.